So there's some, you know, I've just been reading about the stages that Parliament go through when they vote law through and put it through. Although I didn't really understand these public bill committees, right? You know, who like sort of shape the law and legislation, because it's usually the government who introduced public bills, but then they've got those private members bills when they can they draw a lottery for it to see who gets to do it first or whatever, introduce it first. But hardly anyone's doing private bills, and they should be doing loads of them, but I don't think anyone can afford it. Apparently it costs more if people oppose it, even though it's money quite with the price if it's not for profit. No one's hardly doing them. I just can't believe that. And one of the women who has dealt with them in the past, or who does deal with them when people bring them, says that the government are always saying, there's got to be no other way that you can possibly do it, or this or that. And I'm like, what? It's like everyone's got a right to prefer bills into Parliament, right? It's like everyone's got a right to prefer petitions into Parliament in the public or private business, right? I think a lot of these lawyers might have been misled by Parliament in the past, and this is why you've got to hold them up to scrutiny now for this petitions committee, right? In theory, if you can write, if you know legislation and you can write law, you could just draft your own public bill yourself and just petition for it, get the whole public to sign for it. Michael Westwood got 3 million signatures on a petition. You say, I want this public bill, right? If people grab hold of their MP, and their MP has got 5,000-10,000 signatures or whatever to support it, but there'll be conflict with their own political party, then I suppose if they're against it. But this is the thing. So I'm just looking at this private bill process, but it says private bills in the UK Parliament are distinct from public bills because they confer special powers on specific individuals, companies, or local authorities rather than the general public. While passing similar formal stages, private bills require external advertisement, allowing affected parties to directly petition against them. Right. So this is kind of really obvious or a no-brainer, but it's just like a little tweak of the mind, or a little tweak in perception, or a little different putting a pair of rose-tinted sunglasses on or whatever, just to see it slightly differently, because sometimes people just look at it from a different perspective or whatever. But it's so local government, it's actually called local government, a local council, right? And everyone knows a local council, they've got parking meters in the town centre, they've got, they govern, they empty the bins, they clean the streets, they, the upkeep, and then they've got local roads they're responsible for, but then the government are responsible for the trunk roads, the main roads are the government's responsibility, and then other roads are the council's responsibility, and you've got all this different governance going on. And then you've got all this, someone wants to build a house, they've got to get planning permission, right? Well, look, this is a fact, right? When before they were getting mayors and aldermen and these corporations and different models of councils, etc., like the London Corporation, right? Well, if you're in an area which did not have a mayor and alderman, which you could have had, right? If you're in the countryside, they heard these cases to do with local matters at the quarter sessions or assizes, right? And you had a jury, and you got permission to build houses, right? The court gave you it. So, if you still needed permission, right? From some sort of, King's Justices or government. But if the jury's there, it's like the local community in the local area decide what you can and can't do, right? It's like local community self-governing, right? Like a random selection of people from the local area decide whether you make a case that you want to put a cottage up, right? And then they say whether you can have it or not, right? That's civil juries. But the thing is, with these mayor, aldermen and corporations, which eventually, turn into the metropolitan councils, or, there are loads of different models of the council. I don't actually get all the different models of the councils. There are slight differences, like a cabinet-based council or whatever, right? But, there are different models for councils which you can have. But at the end of the day, right, depending on which one you've got, because a lot of mayors now are just like ceremonial, right? But it's like a little mini-government, right? A little mini-government which handles the local business, because obviously the main government, but it gives out legislation which those little governments have got to follow, or which the general public have got to follow, right? But there's an insight when I'm talking about this, like, perspective, right? Really, when you go into the council, right, it is a court, right? It's like the court of civil requests. Because the local government under the London Corporation is like, they've got the aldermen, the common councillors look after all different areas, etc. And then you've got the court of aldermen. But they had the criminal court was a committee, right? So when there's crimes, they're on a rota, and, all right, you're doing crime this week, right? And then, they might have a committee, like they've got local planning committee, right, and things like that. See, like the local strategic planning committee who pass planning applications in a council could as well have been sort of like under the London Corporation model. It's like, that's the fucking magistrates court, and I just swore then, right? I used a swear word, right? Like it's just the fucking magistrates court, right? So what I find preposterous and ironic and ridiculous is this, right? If you're in local government, and if you like got the London Corporation sort of model, right, type government, right, if you're doing things like, like petitioning, right, you're getting involved in, the government. Right? This is a governmental process, because, you are wanting to make a case for the government or something, right? You're going around collecting signatures and doing advertisements and promotion, right? Now, if you're doing it to Parliament, right, which is the next level up in government, right, and things like that, and stuff happens, like you're using acts of law, like the control of advertisements, right? The control of advertisements, the council control advertisements, right? But then a police officer comes along and says, oh, what are you doing, right? Well, so, like, putting a notice up, and then he prosecutes you with a crime, right? Well, you're in front of the crime committee, right? Getting charged with a crime, right? But that's a fucking local council, right? There's a committee of the local council, but the local council are responsible for, like, control of advertisements, giving fines out, right? And it's like, the council was supposed to seal off the petitions to Parliament, right? If you've got, like, a large, like, community group petitioning Parliament, right, for a private bill or the public business or something, or they disagree with the council on something or whatever, right? Council seals it off, right? So the council know that you're petitioning Parliament. So if you end up in front of the crime committee and you got prosecuted for, I don't know, sticking stickers on speed cameras that say, like, petitioning Parliament, can you sign it, right? When you're in front of the crime committee, and then it's like, you commit this, it's criminal damage. It's not a petition in Parliament. Like, well, what's that? Well, you know what the fuck it is, because this is the council, right? And you're the crime committee, and what rota are you on? You're on the fucking, you're on the fucking, the civil requests fucking committee on a Tuesday. But look, right, we've got problems with this whole county court, a magistrates court, these justices who don't really know the law properly, or the volunteers or whatever, magistrates court, and then you're not allowed, anyone in the council's not allowed to be in the magistrates court anymore, all to do with impartiality or whatever. But no one knows what the fuck's going on anymore. No one knows what the fuck's going on. Because, like, you're in front of a magistrates court, like, I don't know, like, Stop the ULEZ, right? Kingsley Hamilton, right? Or what station, like, Stop the ULEZ, right? What the fuck's that? Well, but, yeah, there's, like, fucking Councillor Simon Forthrop and Councillor Susan Hall are turned up outside the magistrates court to watch, right? and sit at the side, watch watch them get prosecuted, for holding the Stop ULEZ signs up or whatever the fuck it was, right? I'm swearing now, right? But this necessitates swearing, right? It's like, like fucking Penfold and Danger Mouse, isn't it? It's like, what the fuck is Simon Forth up to? It's like, can you imagine, right? It's like, Simon Forthrop's on a fucking rota, Bromley fucking Council, on a fucking Tuesday at 4 o'clock, he's on the fucking crime committee. Oh, look, it's Kingsley Hamilton. Oh, hello, Kingsley. I'm on the crime committee this week. What's going on? Oh, I've, cut down a couple of ULEZ cameras, right? Oh, right. Well, just a minute. Let's rewind a bit. Oh, look. It's Simon Forthrop, Councillor Simon Forthrop, outside the fucking court, making a statement. These people are innocent. They're innocent. They've been falsely accused. They're innocent. Just a minute. Who's the more... It's like, he has to play the Ginger Mouse music. He's fantastic. He's amazing. Wherever there is danger, he'll be there. Danger Mouse. Danger Mouse. Danger Mouse. He's Simon Forthrop. He's on the rota. He's on the crime committee this week. On a Monday. It's like, oh, look. It's like a day in the life. Got up, got out of bed. I dragged a comb across my head. It's the fucking Beatles. Look, it's Simon Forthrop. Look, he's outside the fucking magistrate's court giving a public speech to the press saying, this man is innocent. This man is innocent. I profess this man is innocent. They're falsely accused. I got up, got out of bed, I pulled a comb across my head, got on the bus in seconds flat, and when I got into the council, I found out I was late. Ooh, look, where's my fucking time schedule? Oh, it's Councillor Forthrop, he's late for work. Oh, what rota am I on this week? Oh, look, you're on the crime committee. Oh, look, it's Simon Forthrop, sat in the fucking front of the magistrate's court. Oh, it's Kingsley Hamilton. Hello, Kingsley. Oh, what you in here for today? Oh, I've been cutting on some fucking ULEZ cameras. Oh, those ones that I were giving a fucking speech out the other day saying that you're fucking innocent. There's something defectively wrong with these magistrates' courts, clerks, legal advisors, right? There's some defect. It's like faulty towers. There's something fucking severely wrong with the structure of government, right? And then, coming back to planning consents and planning permissions, right, which is all done by a special committee, nearly as exciting as the crime committee. I would have the crime committee anymore, right? No, it's just a strategic planning committee, right? There's enough crime going on there because they're passing things all the time, right? When no one wants it fucking built, right? I've never seen as many objections. Everyone's objecting against it, but it's like, approved. Well, we've got to approve so many, Well, I don't think you have to prove. If you got to prove so many, what's the point in them making a case, right? What's the point in making a case in front of the? Why put evidence? Why put the plans in front of the council? Oh, to have a look at what they're going to build and see, whether it's appropriate or not. Oh, right. So it's got to be appropriate, is it, right? Almost like shaping a fucking private bill in it. Just a minute. Are these actually applicants making a case to the council, or is it just like, the Labour Party members who are just like shaping the fucking bill? This is the thing. So, anyway, really, these planning consent orders, right, when, present your case, not just like a suitcase full of money on the table in the council, like actually supposedly like, the plans to pass, right? Making a case, right? So it's actually like a private bill. It's exactly like a private bill, right? So, like, if you put a private bill to Parliament, you've got to go through and get it passed, right? So, like, it's like a little private bill locally. but not like a statutory instrument. It's like just like a little odd. Well, it's only in the local area, right? But like you can get it in Parliament, right? You can get an Act of Parliament passed for the local area, but that's something that the council will have to obey as well, right? But the council can make orders, but only for the local area, and it can't override, the government's, legislation, right? But it effectively, right, when someone goes into a council and applies for planning, they're trying to get a private bill passed, right? And then you petition against it. So the objections are the public's opportunity to petition against it because it affects them, right? That's what the objections are. And then when you get the local authorities petitions order 2010, which says, like local petitions are excluded matters in building and planning. Why? Because you don't do, because you've already got objections, right? You've already got objection process. So, like, it's already there to use to people to petition against it. But the objections are really, they collect everyone, when everyone objects to it, they're kind of like, signing against it. But they get to write their own evidence, right? Not just like put the signature on it, right? That's the whole point. But clearly, when you go to Parliament, right? In the e-petitions, they're trying to make out that you can't do building and planning matters. But it's to Parliament, right? But it's like, well, how do I do a private bill about land usage then? Like, if you're not allowed to do it. It's like public and private business or to matters of Parliament. This is the thing. But why can't you have a public bill, particularly if it's like the whole land affects the public and you want to change the usage for everyone rather than just like, you see, when you're building a house, right, it's private. So, like, a company's got some land and then they build it and then it's like it's like a little private bill to say, like, you can build on this land. Well, if they own the land, right? But, if it's joint owned by the council. But even though it's privately owned, everyone gets a say in it because it affects their local area, it affects their traffic, it affects their travel, it affects the views, it affects the scenery, right? But it can still be brought under a public bill because, like, you might want to make it into a public park or be part of a public heritage site, or you might say like the whole county, right? The whole county of the whole area, it might affect the whole, like, Glastonbury at the moment, they're wanting to put it onto World Heritage, right? They want to make Glastonbury a World Heritage site. That's public business, right? But the public business then will, they're wanting to try and stop those developments, like loads of smaller private business stuff, right? But so I'm just what I was trying to get my head around is like, how does that compare? So like if the local council, if it's like little mini local private bills and you get an opportunity to petition against it, just like in Parliament, why aren't loads of people doing it in Parliament? Because like, they're doing it all the time. There's loads and loads and loads and loads of developers and builders going in to get planning permission and consent, and normal people do it for their own houses, right? But they don't normally go to government for that. But can you imagine, right, if you apply to the local council and they reject your planning, right, because you want to make your house bigger and they rejected it, right, and then apparently you're not allowed to apply again. But then that's really when you can go to Parliament because you're opposing the council, you disagree with them, right? And get a private bill to say that you can change your land usage or permission to build on it or something like that. There are all different kind of stuff you can do, but people don't think of it, and I suppose it can be costly to put it through. But, this woman was telling me, like, this Pam Thompson, she was saying, like, oh, the government don't let you do this and the government don't let you do that with private bills, or always they can't be, you got to have exhausted all possible options, right? Fuck me, exhausted all possible options. They won't even let they're rejecting the majority of people's e-petitions on things that they were allowing them to do 2010 to 2015. And now this committee's popped up, they're not letting them do anything, right? And as far as I know, you can still ask the government for the same things that existed before, right? So they're just like, we're being utterly and completely conned. And, I'm surprised that a lot of these, really top law firms with like these barristers who have got a lot more they sound impressive. When you speak to them, they've got an extensive vocabulary and repertoire of special legal terms. Like when they open their mouth and talk, you're like, what the fuck's he talking about, right? Like, ask them a question. Have you ever had to, enforce the privilege of Parliament when you're doing a private bill? And then he starts talking, and I'm like, oh dear. I don't know. I can't understand what he's saying because, like, he's got some really complicated technical vocabulary going on there with intricate legal terms, not just the word plaintiff, right? It's not like Dragon's Den, when they're talking business talk about, equity or whatever. What's that? What does that mean? Equity, right? He's got a really, really technical jargon coming out. But yeah, it seems that I'm getting the public business standing orders out and holding Parliament to account because they're just blagging us, basically. I think with law and legal stuff, you just need to learn the words and terminology for it all, like in business, right? I suppose in a way, if you're doing like an act of law about sport, right? Because you can have like, culture, media and sport, there can be acts of law about sports, right? So like, if you know everything about sports, then it's likely that you're going to understand the law around it, right? Or if you know everything about, business or taxation, VAT, right? If you're an accountant and you look at tax law, you're going to know about it, or ancient monuments because, it's your field of expertise or your field of interest, and therefore it's just a matter of terminology, to know what he's talking about. Or you could just generally know law and understand general legislation. But, I aren't a barrister, and I think that some of these barristers who do these, really big cases and it's all about, huge amounts of money resting on the case, they just, know about financial things. They know about businesses and companies. I mean, being a lawyer is financial, and being a lawyer working at a law firm or being a barrister involves finance, right? And employment and all kinds of different things like that. And, the technicalities, depending on what the field is, there are technicalities in this, public business in Parliament and petitioning, right? You got to learn them, but you got to be interested in it. I suppose you got to have an interest in it. Some people like numbers, got to have an interest in numbers. Business people like numbers because they like money and they like making money, right? So, when it comes to VAT and tax and all kinds of things like that, they're keen to learn how to run a business, and they want to learn how to run a business because they want to have a business and they want to make money out of it. And, but some people just, aren't that interested in the financial side of it. They're just like, making things craft or whatever. But this is the thing. So, it's some things aren't actually that technical or complicated, but I've a lot of it is in the blag. Some of these people are like really calling the bluff. Like some of these barristers, like it's all about brainiacs. It's all about kind of like it's like Owen R. Schneider, that wrestler. It's all about like flexing the brain muscles, like the temple, Ed Templeton, isn't it? It's like the the vein on the side of the forehead, bulging, these, because some of these barristers are really serious bluffers, right? Particularly when they're up in courts, But it's always worse when, if it's criminal law and you're on the receiving end, you're always in a awkward situation because, you're always going to argue for yourself and make your case, and you're in a vulnerable position because you're on the defence, aren't you, right? I find it's always easier when, I'm trying to help someone else because, I'm not myself on the receiving end. So it's sort of like, but that's when courts won't let you represent, or they won't, when you write in, they won't let you make representations, they won't acknowledge it. But when you're doing petitioners in groups and you're all signed and you're all meant to be joined as a party, that's when you're meant to be able to represent the rights of the group and the body and so forth. But this is what courts aren't accepting or understanding. They're posing a really awkward situation at the moment because clerks and legal advisors and court managers, there's no you can't reason with them. You can't actually reason logic with them. Even if you explain it, they're told to just like, nope, like a nope machine. No, like that, you can't explain to them. You can't even when you're doing law, right? This is what we're doing. It's like you go in there, I go up to the counter, like, oh, can I have a bag of screws and a drill or whatever? You go into the court, all right, I've got some law here. Well, I'm a representative. We're signing a petition to Parliament and we're joined as a body, and these are our rights and we're on parliamentary privilege. It's like, speak to them because face ain't listening, right? They won't accept. And then this is the thing with the Parliamentary Papers Act, you can get cases stopped, stayed, intervened in. Doesn't have to be the judge who does it, the court can do it. All these things which I intuited and knew, learned, understood. And these people just won't accept it when you tell them. But, it's like going to McDonald's and saying, can I have a burger? No. Well, so why does it say that on the fucking menu up there, right? Can I have a burger? No, you can't have one. Get the money out, put it on the table. No, we're not taking your money, right? Say like going to a court, right? Oh, I'll have a number 7, a chicken McNugget sandwich. Can I have a Parliamentary Papers Act, Section 2, here we are, petitioners, there's a fucking petition. Oh, look, there's a photograph of him holding a Stop ULEZ sign, right? Yeah, we'll have this case stopped now. Nope. But we've been stitched up. Because the magistrates, actually, they're all voluntary, and apparently they aren't properly legally trained, and all King's Counsel, and they don't actually know the law. So when you go in and you're a commoner, it's like you're begging, please, sir, can I have some more? But it's like, it's like they don't know the law. If they don't know the law, they need a legal advisor, and you go in and you do know the law. It's like you're going into somewhere where no one knows the fucking law. But what's the clerk fucking supposed to be there for, right? Or to check you fill the forms in properly, right? There's something wrong with these magistrates' courts and criminal law where it's just like, oh, we won't take no for an answer. It's like there's some conditioning going on where it's like, call my bluff. Well, actually, I'm not bluffing. I'm telling the truth. I'm not calling your bluff. It's like, pull a £20 note out, right? They put it under a fucking ultraviolet light to see if it's a real £20 note. It's like, oh, here's a Parliamentary Papers Act 1840. Have you got a fucking ultraviolet scanner to make sure it's a real act of law? Fuck me! What the fuck's the legal advisor there for? Type the fucking keyboard, punch it up on the system. Oh, you can't have audience from this court. You're not the defendant. No, I'm merging a fucking body with the fucking defendant. What's that? Why should these people working in there? And then there's lammies wanting to get rid of juries, right? The magistrates' court is the, greatest failure in the history of the fucking world. And every single person who walks through the door is a criminal until they prove they're not a criminal. We can't trust a thing they say. They're blaggers, No, the fucking barrister who walks through with the fucking brain pulsing on the side of his forehead, like fucking, Peter Gotch, KC, it's like on the fucking end of the good and the bad and the ugly, like we've like put the stone in the fucking middle, with the fucking music playing, like there's Gringo, Angel Eyes, dun, 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 like who's the fucking bullshitter, so I look you in the eye, that's the fucking Parliamentary Papers Act, Section 2 there, right, and then proceedings in Parliament. No, you're not. Yeah, I am. No, you're not. Yeah, I am. No, you're not. Yes, I fucking am. Get the fucking Holy Bible out. Where's my fucking hand on it? What do you want to fucking walk into the court with the fucking Archbishop of Canterbury with a fucking, choir fucking in front of her, all line up and they sing, start singing, like, there's the fucking Exorcist, right? I swear on the Holy Bible, it is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Can I have an audience in this fucking court? It is like, this is the... Every single person who walks through that court door, these magistrates, I've seen it all before, we've heard it all before. Here's another blagger, he's another thief, a pickpocket, a vandal, a drunk, a vagabond, oh, guilty until proved innocent, right? Or somebody walks through the fucking door, right? Yeah, well, excuse me, Your Honour, but I'm engaged in a very important work to Parliament, do you mind? I've been accused of putting stickers on a fucking metal post. This privilege, don't you know? Preposterous! What do you mean preposterous? I'm just told the truth. There's fucking Lammy's wanting to scrap the juries, and then Starmer's going, I know we've done a very the test. Oh, the test. The self-sacrifice now. The test's coming in now. Will Starmer self-sacrifice himself for the whole country? The test, the Starmer test, the sacrifice. Well, fucking Starmer sacrifices pension plan for the whole fucking nation. This is the thing. Oh, the Crown Prosecution Service with their fucking complicated jury tests and, all these weird arcane CPS cleansing fucking exercises for assisting offenders. The test. Who come up with these fucking tests, right? They could do with tests. There's one thing, right, that the CPS have failed a test on, which is the fucking IQ of a fucking voluntary magistrate, right? What is the average IQ of a fucking magistrate, right? And court clerk in this country? What is their own inherent initiative, their own intellect inherent in their human being? Not like train, woo, train comes down the track on the fucking silver rails. Ooh, policy. Can't do that. Policy. I'm fucking glued to the track. Have they got any personal intelligence, right? Have they got any intuition? Have they been taught the full spectrum of the law? Why is it when you get some fucking law out, apparently, no. It's like, they're meant to be, people meant to be going in and swearing affidavits. So can I get an affidavit sworn in? Oh, I can do that for you, sir. Have you got a case listed with us? Well, actually, I don't, but the friend who I'm representing does. Well, are you a qualified barrister, sir? Are you got permission to be represented at the bar? No, we're joined as a party. We are one. We are one. We are the many, but we are one. We are one united. We are one entity, one body. Well, I'm sorry the defendant seems to be called Mr. Simpkins. Yes, well, you've got that written down on your sheet. But we are. Stop the ULEZ. We are suffering criminal charges. We are many. We are stop the ULEZ. You got that wrong down on your sheet. The police officer didn't say stop the ULEZ have damaged the camera, right? He said John Simpkins has, but John Simpkins acting as stop the ULEZ, right? This is a thing. There's something seriously fucking intellectually, cognitively defective with these magistrates' courts and clerks in the magistrates' courts, particularly when there's Simon Forthrop there, stood outside the court. Oh, these people are innocent, He's Councillor Simon Forthrop. These people are innocent, I swear. They're innocent, they're wrongly accused. But not on a fucking Tuesday when he's on the fucking crime committee on the fucking London Corporation with fucking Nesbitt. Look, it's Nesbitt. Where's the fucking Sheriff of London? This is the thing. There's some really clever fancy stuff, that Keir Starmer gets up to in his fucking, the test, the fucking, we did a legal test, It's really complicated. You couldn't possibly understand it because you're not intelligent enough, right? But here's an act of law, Walk into a courtroom. It's called How about the ignorance test? Let's go undercover, right, and make a film like BBC Panorama, the ignorance test, right? BBC Panorama go around the country, right, in disguise into magistrates' courts, test the intelligence of magistrates, test the honesty, integrity of magistrates. Fail, 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 fail. Oh, look, it's a fail-safe. They've got a fail-safe system in, just to make sure no criminals con them or lie or cheat or blag them, But here's an honest person, He's this must be he's an honest face, It's Keir Starmer. He's written a report, and now apparently he's, he failed the test because he's not even sticking to his own report, This is the thing. Just because you're a fucking, professional witness for biochemistry fucking investigation, in some chemical leak does not necessarily mean that, you're qualified to do law. But it doesn't seem like clerks or magistrates are either. It seems like only the fucking legal advisories, and if you're lucky enough to get a good one, and if they can be bothered turning the computer on. I've had legal advisors when they haven't even got a computer, they've just got some general notebook, riffling through the papers, trying to find something. Oh, look, there's the special reasons in there. Actually had that. I've actually had it. I knew it existed because I've actually had it. I've been granted it myself. It's possible, although it costs you, you'll have to have a nervous breakdown if you want that one. This is the thing. So, anyway, going on a bit of a tangent then, let's try to get back onto course again. So, a little private bill in the local area for permission to do something on your own private property, and people who it affects have a legal right to oppose it, right? So that's a little bit like in Parliament when you got a private bill. Now, how does that work at the assizes? Well, it's like civil requests, isn't it? Civil courts, civil requests, and they didn't necessarily have a local council, right? So that'd be what it was. So, and funnily enough, something's just a figment, a thought has just popped into my head, which is extremely relevant now when I've just thought of that, because they used when you're reading, if you read Henry Kerr, if you read that Henry Kerr book, about constitutional law, and possibly a bit of William Prynne as well, Henry Kerr was talking about bills of indictment, called bills. A bill of indictment, that's criminal. It's criminal law in a criminal court. You're being indicted, but it was a bill. Oh, that's funny, because we're putting a bill through Parliament, but that's for an act of law, isn't it? Well, actually, no, it's called a bill of indictment. If it's a bill of indictment, and if it's in, criminal court, does that mean, you can have a bill for granting cottages in the Court of Civil Requests? It's a bill, but it's not the old bill, it's quite a new one, but, in a local area. So, are the local councils really bills, local bills? Local bills, private bills, public bills, private bills, local bills. This is the thing. So, bill of indictment, it all makes sense now, doesn't it, right? So, bill of, you can have that in a court, right? So, but obviously, not made by Parliament into the legislation of the country, only for a local order. So, this is the thing. All these kind of terminology and things like that. Why aren't people going to Parliament and doing private bills in there? Have they been blag? Did they cull it off and blag even the parliamentary agents in the similar sort of way as they're trying to do now with e-petitions, when they weaned it out of Parliament and sort of killed off the paper? So at 1 minute there's 10,000 a session. Now there's 75 to 100 or whatever a session, or 50. in paper, but the country's never been in as much uproar, political engagement, and outrage, right? But as paper petitions are dropping through the bottom of the floor still, but they've managed to get everyone onto this electronic track, and now they're all just rejecting them all. So it's just like they've got these gunmen shooting us all down. These like people are like they're just shooting everyone down. 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 3,000, 2,000, right? That's how many grievances there were. But no, actually, no, because, you're not telling us the truth, right? Look at what number is it, right? Oh, look, 7,364, right? This is the thing. So, there are actually, at the moment, the truth of the matter is that there is the same number of petitions as what there were in the 1800s, around that sort of frequency, because people are really annoyed, but they're censoring the numbers and figures and framing it to be completely smaller numbers. So when, if you go into the future and then you got some historian, if they've even still got historians, and they're looking back in time and they're like, what's that petitioning was going on around 2026? Well, look, the figures are going down. Oh, they must have been really happy with that government then, there's hardly anyone complaining, right? It's like, well, that's strange, I just found a newspaper report saying that, 150,000 people marched over London Bridge chanting Keir Starmer is a wanker, right? But looking at the statistics, the petition figures are on the way down, right? So can't be that many other people complaining. Ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth? Not. Where are all the other complaints that have, been, stashed away and not even shown up to even being rejected, right? This is the thing, there was some popular prime minister in history. So, but anyway, I don't know what's going on. I think they must have called it off, the private bill thing, but, and because we didn't have the internet at the time, no one noticed it, and it's also financial as well. But they're managing to fob everyone off with these judicial reviews. Greenbelt land. Oh, we want to try and stop them. Oh, you'll have to get a judicial review. It's going to be about £20,000, right? We'll get the community group doing a scrape around. GoFundMe or whatever. Well, if you're going to get a GoFundMe scrape around, why don't you, scrape around to get a private bill put through, right? Might be someone opposing it. Well, that's the idea, right? Obviously, they've got a chance to oppose it, but surely it can't be that more than 20 grand if you're only paying quarter of the price, unless the solicitor's going to rip you off. But, if you could, I reckon I could probably put a private bill through. And this is the thing, right? When I was talking to that woman, and she was actually quite nice, that woman, but she was like, it's quite expensive, there's solicitor fees as well, which is like the expensive part probably. But I'm like, that's funny, because when I looked at the sessional returns, it tells you how much time they spent on it in Parliament, right? And it was like an hour. It's like, what? A fucking hour? 1 hour? It's like in the 1972 Petitions Committee report, we met about 4 times a year or whatever, or we met about 4 times a month. I think it was 4 times a year, I can't remember anyway. A month, a year, whatever. We met 4 times, how long for? A minute. 1 minute. 1 minute. You got to be kidding me, right? An hour. That's how much they spent on the private bill time. It can't be that expensive if they only spent an hour on it, right? I mean, obviously, a lot of the work might be done at the solicitors preparing it and drafting it up, right? But I can draft and prepare an act of law, right? At least, something like the Parliamentary Papers Act 1840. It's not that long act. Or there are some private bills which are like 1 page for some electricity company just having an update on one of their fucking instruments or something, and it's just like, to add 1 line of legislation, so you can draft a private bill up with the whole intro and layout of it all, and it could just have 1 line of fucking legislation, like that Parliament Act 1911, like which proves that the privileges of Parliament exist. Even though Professor Mark Elliott would argue with that at Cambridge University, because apparently it's all been swept away by EU law, which I think I understand his point now. His point is that effectively, if you wanted to, you could, like, every single person in every single civil court case every day of the week just could keep raising incompatible with human rights complaints against the government, and that'd give them something to chew on, wouldn't it, right? That'd be, if every single person complained about the government breaking EU law, right? You could just, like, keep them busy, couldn't you? It's like and then, like, you get to the point where you're like, is this interfering with the business of Parliament, right? You know, if you kept going vexatious, EU contravention claims all day, you could really disrupt Parliament then. Then they would be starting, But this is the thing, if you're allowed to go into a civil court with a human rights incompatibility against something that MPs are doing or have done, which is not an act of a public authority, then why can't you go to the Ombudsman and get them, complaining about every single thing that the MPs are voting on is, against, EU law? But apparently you can only do it after they've made it into the law. After they've made it into the law, then it can be scrutinised, which is what they're doing with Priti Patel, right? But they didn't stop her from doing it in the first place. But apparently, so theoretically, you are supposed to be able to go to the Ombudsman and say, that law that Priti Patel just put through, it's a load of tosh, right? Put it back again, right? But but can't you do that about MPs voting, because it's not an actual public authority. So I think they really got the knickers in the twist with that EU law nonsense, and maybe that's what Mark Elliott couldn't get his head around. But I think in a way, I think the magistrates and judges think that they've got a legal right to challenge all the petitioners, even though they're meant to be privileged of Parliament, because if it's EU compatibility, but not everything is EU compatibility. It's kind of almost as if the judges and magistrates sort of think but they still got to have leave, and they're not getting the leave. So, the whole thing is that there's some serious, that there's some serious inconsistencies, incompatibilities, that there's some serious incompatibilities with a lot of these laws. And I think, to be honest, they're getting more and more and more incompatibilities. And they keep repealing things they're not allowed to repeal, like, things like, the confirmation of the charters and all kinds of stuff like that. Like fucking Lammy's on with now with Starmer, with all his juries thing and Magna Carta and that. But they started messing around with that in like 1948, and then in 1976 or whatever was Criminal Law Act, and then 1948, and they started to tinker around with it then. But up until up until 1948, they hadn't messed around with all those constitutional rights. It's actually, I think it's a thing of, Queen Elizabeth II era. But then you've got the whole sort of like, was the Tumultuous Petitioning Act violation of parliamentary privilege, to put it into the courts when it's when in privilege of Parliament. But then they ended up sort of doing the same thing with the election law. But apparently they'd already had the election law in the assizes for a while in the prehistory. And then they put it back into Parliament again because they were arguing that it shouldn't have been in there. But before that, it was the King can decide it. So they've been knocking those things backwards and forwards a little bit. And then, they got rid of the Tumultuous Petitioning Act and the courts didn't have anything to do with it. But that means the courts didn't have anything to do with it. They're not supposed to get involved with it, but they're getting themselves involved with it, and they're trying to make out that Parliament doesn't have any. Well, what's happened is, instead of having the courts aren't allowed to have anything to do with Parliament procedures and processes, right? What they've got now is that Parliament, even though you're doing a parliamentary process, Parliament can't have anything to do with it and doesn't have anything to do with it, only the courts do, which is like the complete opposite, which I think is quite ironic. So, and then the 1688 Bill of Rights did contradict the 1661 Act, but, that was spoken about. Herbert Broom openly spoke about that in his books, like, So they do these contradictions a lot of the time, and they've got like seditious meetings and all kinds of different stuff. But I think they're getting worse now. I mean, there was like, one or two inconsistencies, and then you've got like the Climate Right Act, and it says can't use protections for civil debt. But then in the 1700s, they conjured up all these different terms, like, they've got like protections, and then they've got privilege, and then they've got parliamentary privilege. So, like, you've got all these different terms. So you say, well, you can't use any protections in this act, right? But does that mean that I can't use any privileges? If it says I can't use any privileges, does it mean I can't use parliamentary privilege? And this is when you get, like, your brain vein out popping. You really get, like, Peter Gotcha's KC, his brain, the vein in the side of his temples, like, pulsing. It's like pulsing. Is that a red card you're holding up? No, it's a yellow card. No, it's red. No, it's not. It's like on Big Brother, isn't it? How many fingers am I holding up? 4. No, you're not. You're holding up 5 fingers. No, they're 4. No, they're not. They're 5 fingers. It's like the brain thing's pulsing, like on the side of the head, like the end of the good, the bad, and the ugly, like, it's like who's got the greatest bluff, whatever. Is that a red card you're holding, or a yellow card? That's a red card. No, it's not. It's give me a keg of beer. So yeah, I mean, this is a problem now, because I think it's getting worse. There are more. I think there were less incompatibilities, but they keep repealing things that they're not supposed to be repealing. I think they like to do it on purpose, just like a power thing, like a thrill, isn't it? It's like a thrill thing. But I think with the 1661, it was all about like the Restoration, wasn't it? And it was all about like the Civil War and Cromwell and like all the fucking toll. There's that issue with the tolls on the road, and I think monarchs sometimes like to express their power and authority. But sometimes it definitely tests the public's patience. But there's also a little bit of like stupidity in it as well. I really don't know what's going on with this assisted dying bill, because you can't. That is like a real. I mean, I don't really know what they're going on with that when that Article 2, the right to life, is so explicit. I mean, I think they're just getting carried away with themselves. Maybe they like it because of like thrill. Maybe it's a thrill thing, like people like to go on TV game shows for a thrill, like, to be in front of the whole country and doing something that you're not supposed to do. There's like the danger element, almost like fucking, Penny Mordaunt having sex in the chamber. Oh, you're not supposed to be doing that, sort of thing. They should do that on that, Kern Crew Gazette, that Kern Crew Gazette, they could have had Penny Mordaunt having sex in the chamber, and then someone walks in, like, I don't know, Lindsay Hoyle, and goes, I would have got away with it too if it weren't for you damn kids, or something like that. Let's do the Scooby-Doo ending, that would have been quite funny. But anyway, I don't even know what this talk's about now, because I was supposed to be talking about, like, the fact that local planning orders are like a little private bill in the local area, and people can petition against it, right? But people should be doing that in Parliament as well. But they're not doing it. But yet they're doing loads of fundraisers, GoFundMes for judicial reviews. So I don't know why the Defend Our Juries don't get a private bill put through to say that they've got an entitlement to a jury, right, in a certain county or area or something like that, or just they. If a private bill can only affect certain people, maybe they could say like, oh, defend our jury. Like you got prescribed groups. Like the Secretary of State's got an instrument, right? That's an act of law, right? And then it puts it in the schedule that the Secretary of State can put a prescribed group into the schedule, right? Maybe like Defend Our Juries could go into Parliament with a private bill and say that Defend Our Juries are a group who are entitled under Lammy's new law to have a jury, right? Or create a Schedule 1, right, in Lammy's new law, right? Maybe they could have their own instrument made that we can insert special groups who are allowed and entitled to have a jury, like car thieves. Well, car thieves can have a jury in the new schedule, but I guess that's a private bill because it affects the whole public. But you could have a personal one, because if it affects you, theoretically, like, because I said to that woman, I'm like, well, like, the world's your oyster, like the imagination's the limits for private bills, whatever you can think of. And she's like, oh, no, you can't do that. There's got to be no other way to do it. Well, if it's fucking legislation of England, how else are you going to do it, right? Unless you make your own government. Because I had a joke for that. And my joke was this, right? She's like, oh, no, you can only do private bills if there's no other way to do it. Well, no, I've got the right to prefer bills into Parliament on public or private business. It's a right, the right to petition. I've got a right to do it, because you can prefer them into either house, right? Well, I can think of another way to do it. How about, well, this could be treasonous now, so, like, this is just comedy, right? This is like a joke, by the way, right? So, I know, there's got to be no other way to do it. Well, I would start your own government and make your own legislation. That's another way to do it. Can we do it that way? I put a private bill through to have my own council and set up a corporation, my own authority. I'll make my own local orders, So, this town ain't big enough for the both of us. One of us has got to leave. This is like bought us like Sparks, isn't it? Mayor versus mayor, or councillor versus councillor, or whatever. So he's got another way to do it. There's no other way to make legislation than in Parliament. That's the only thing. There's no other way to do it, right? That's all I want an act of law. Was there's another way to do it? You could get private acts. I wonder if you can get private acts for crime, but why not? Why not? You can get private bills for anything. Why not crime? Why not that? When I've got a special. I'm entitled to a jury, right? How about that? Put that in the schedule. John Smith is entitled to a jury, right? Put me in the schedule. Like Sturrid's law or whatever. Lammy, I want my own schedule. I want to rescind my own. We don't consent, Lammy. We do not consent, submit and accept your terms, Lammy, right? Put me in the schedule. John Smith does not relinquish his right to a jury. Put his name in the schedule. John Smith shall retain his right to a jury trial. Put him in the schedule. Sign, right? What Lammy could have a role, couldn't he, in Parliament? You could turn up, like, it could be on the corner of Fleet Street at 59 Fleet Street, or Lammy's constituency office, right? Put an advert in the newspaper. Anyone who does not want to relinquish their right to a jury, who refuses to submit consent and accept, right, to sign their name in a book at Lammy's fucking corner shop or whatever, right, constituency office, right? And those people will be added to the schedule. Those who refuse to relinquish their right to a jury, right? Stick me in the schedule. The refuse. I will not wear a COVID mask. I will not wear a COVID mask, Lammy. Right? Put me in the schedule. I want private bill put through. Oh no, you can only have private bills for rivers, embankments, highways, land, building and planning. But, what about public bills? Can we have public bills for building and planning? They excluded matters, Well, they need to be excluded for scheduled monuments because that affects building and planning, right? Surely, are highways public bills? Are they private, Highways of the country, that affects building and planning, Oh, we can't have a local building and planning issue. Well, why not? What a remedy? We've got a grievance. We've got a grievance with the local council. Why does it have to be private? And surely, this is the thing. It says community groups can have private bills. But if you've got a community group, right, and it's not for profit, is that not public business? That's the thing. Just a minute. We've got a community group and we're not for profit. In fact, it's the whole village, right? The whole village, 3,000 people, signed a petition, right? They want a bill put through to stop the council. Is that private business or public, right? At what point, Mr. Smith is wanting an extension on his conservatory. It's a little local planning matter, his own private business. But then, everyone who's got a right to object to it effects, can object to it. And then, just a minute, someone's bringing a case to the council here. The whole town want to, get the stop building in the area. Is that private business or public business, right? Well, if it's the entire fucking village and ward, surely it's public business, right? They want a local order put through, to remove the land so it's not allocated for building anymore, right? But then again, when has that stopped anyone when it's all allocated for Greenbelt, Because what the whole point of Manchester Save Our Greenbelt is the fact that it's not meant to be Greenbelt. And they're not supposed to build on it. That's the whole point. So, I think, going back to the 1800s in the very first standing orders, there is no difference between public and private business, right? There isn't any difference. They don't have public business or private business. They just have bills for different subjects, right? So, like bills for highways, right? Bills for rivers, right? Bills for roads, bills for, criminal law, right? Bills for fucking building a power station. So, is the right of the subjects to petition the king? Well, what is the subject? Local building and development. Oh, that'd be the bill then, right? It's like, maybe it's a con, public and private bills, Maybe it's a trick. Maybe it's meant like bills for one person versus bills for the community, right? So therefore, if you got a community group, how could you have a private bill? What's the difference? Well, if it's private, this is private property. So why are the whole public come out to oppose it then? Because that's the public's business if it's affecting loads of people in the community, right? But you're doing a private bill, right? But the public are the respondents, and that's why you got to put in the newspaper. So that's a mind that is in our mind bender, right? In that mind bender, public business, private business. Public business, private business. This is a mind bender for Lindsay Hoyle. Look, private applicant, public respondents. Private applicant, public respondents. Private person applies, the whole public respond. The whole fucking ward, the whole fucking village, objections. In fact, the entire village objected against it, but the council still fucking approved it. How is that possible? Oh, look, it's a Labour Party, and look, here's a Labour Party and building developer, their favourite buddy, who gave the award, the building award to last year. Is there any impartiality lacking there in that fucking case, This is the thing. There was no difference between public and private bills. It was subject category. It was categorized by subject, like the right of the subjects, right? So, rivers, streets, buildings, crime, up above the streets and houses, rainbow climbing high. Everyone can see it shining over the sky. Whole world with a rainbow. Hey, look, there's a red bill. Here comes a red bill. Here is a red bill coming through Parliament now. And here is a violet bill, and there's a yellow one. Whole world with a rainbow. There's a flock of birds there, but one's landed on my head. Is this a private bird? It's having a poop on my head. Look, it's a private bird having a private poop, but there's a flock of them. Nothing about, there's a flock of birds having poop in public, they're walking around the bus station, a one-footed bird, this is the thing, we're getting blagged by these people, we're getting the fucking Peter Gotch KC pulsing brain vein, the whole kind of like, oh, it's the Attorney General, it's like the fucking end of the good, the bad, and the ugly, like, it's also in a triangle, like, dun 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 dun, dun dun dun, come, take 'em. Is that a private bill or a public bill, right? Is that private respondent or a public? The public responding, Well, this is affecting private persons, but the public turned up in the private capacity as citizens, You know, in my private life as a citizen, I committed a crime, but it was an offence to the king, not the public. I broke the king's law, but it offended a person. Even though they've got to keep the public safe, it's the public business, right? But it was private crime by me, and I was prosecuted. This is the thing. Is it? You see, it should be like Mark Radcliffe, shouldn't it? Bird or bloke, bloke or bird or bloke, right? So it's like, private or public. Private or public. I am having a private wee in public. What is the bus station toilet? Private or public? It could be like a game on the BBC, like Matt Radcliffe, couldn't it? Private or public, right? Okay then. So it's like how about going for a walk in the woods? Private or public? I'm going for a little walk by myself in the woods. Private or public, right? Yeah, well, you don't own those woods. They're publicly owned, yes, but it's a private walk, right? Just a minute. I'm going to go speak with my friend in private over there in the woods. Would you mind staying here? Because I don't want you to overhear me. We're just going to have a private conversation in the woods. But it's a public park, Here's a mind bender. Look, it's the test for Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer, the test, private or public, right? Keir Starmer's past CPS reports, private or public? Keir Starmer's pension plan, private or public? Keir Starmer's civil service pension plan, private or public? Who's responsible for it? Who's accountable for? Who are the wages of civil servants accountable to the public? Private or public? Right? A crown prosecutor. Private or public? Is it private or is it public? Right? Getting thrown out of a pub in Bath. A free house. Privately owned. Getting thrown. Came thrown out of a privately owned pub in Bath, but it's like, a public free house, private or public. The pub owner in Bath wants to get an extension on his pub. Is that a private or public bill, right? But it's a public free house. Get out of my pub. Get out of my public free house. Private or public? Keir Starmer getting thrown out of a pub in Bath. Private or Keir Starmer having a bath in number 10. Private or public? Public gallery in the House of Commons. Private or public? Well, strangers. That's interesting. Strangers. Are strangers private or public? Strangers in public or stranger in private? Doesn't really matter. I don't think it's relevant whether they're a stranger or not. I think I'll end it there. I've run out of ideas now.